My mother handed me an itemized bill for my childhood on my 30th birthday and said the words that would end our family forever. "Happy birthday, Amara," she said with a cold smile. "You were a great tax write-off, but your contract is up." My sister laughed while sipping her champagne. My father looked down at his plate. My brother-in-law threw a piece of bread at me like I was a stray dog. They expected tears. They expected the desperate plea of the daughter they had abused for decades. What they did not know was that the woman sitting across from them was no longer their victim. I was their creditor, and I had just called in their debt. Before I tell you how I evicted my entire family from the house they thought they owned, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to become the villain to survive a toxic family. I am Amara Sterling. For 30 years, I played the role of the grateful charity case in the Sterling household. To the outside world, Luther and Patricia Sterling were saints who took in a poor orphan girl to raise alongside their golden child, Chanel. Inside the walls of this 5,000-square-foot Georgian estate in Buckhead, I was nothing more than a servant with a curfew. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. The crystal chandelier above the dining table cast a fractured light over the untouched plates of filet mignon. The air smelled of expensive lilies and old money resentment. Patricia tapped her silver spoon against her wineglass. The sharp, ringing sound cut through the silence. She cleared her throat and adjusted the pearl necklace that I knew was a fake, because I had seen the receipt from a pawn shop 3 years ago. "Attention, everyone!" Patricia announced, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness she reserved for church fundraisers. "We have a special presentation for the birthday girl. Amara, darling, since you are officially 30 today, your father and I decided it is time for full transparency." She slid a thick manila envelope across the mahogany table. It stopped right next to my hand. I did not open it immediately. I looked at Luther, my father, the man who used to sneak me candy when I was 5 but now could not even meet my eyes. "Open it," Chanel urged, leaning forward. Her professionally done makeup could not hide the malicious gleam in her eyes. "You are going to love it. It is exactly what you are worth." I opened the flap. Inside was not a check. It was not a greeting card. It was a stack of papers printed from an Excel spreadsheet. The edges were yellowed, as if this document had been started decades ago. I pulled out the first page. My eyes scanned the columns. March 1998. Diapers and formula. $40. September 2005. School uniforms. $120. July 2010. Dental braces. $4,000. It was a ledger. A detailed, itemized list of every single cent they had ever spent on me. At the bottom of the final page, bolded in red ink, was a grand total, $214,050. Below that, typed in capital letters, were the words, "Obligation fulfilled." I looked up. Patricia was beaming. "You see, Amara," she said, taking a sip of her red wine. "We did the math. When we adopted you, our accountant said the tax credits and the state stipend would offset the cost of raising another child. We treated you like a business investment. But honestly, looking at the inflation-adjusted numbers, you were actually a net loss. The tax benefits ran out when you turned 18. We let you stay in the guest house out of the goodness of our hearts, but 30 is the cutoff." She paused for dramatic effect, waiting for my world to shatter. "Basically, you are evicted," Chanel giggled. "But don't worry, Hunter said you can come clean our apartment on weekends. We will pay you minimum wage. Right, baby?" I shifted my gaze to Hunter, my brother-in-law, a mediocre white man with a trust fund he had already blown through and a startup idea that changed every week. He was currently leaning back in my father's chair, picking his teeth. "Yeah," Hunter drawled. "We need someone to scrub the toilets. You are good at cleaning up messes, right, Amara? That is what you people are good at." He tore off a chunk of a dinner roll and tossed it across the table. It hit my chest and fell into my lap. "Eat up," Hunter laughed. "Don't want you starving before your shift starts." The room went silent. The disrespect hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. In the past, the old Amara would have run to the bathroom to cry. The old Amara would have apologized for existing. But the Amara sitting here tonight had spent the last 5 years building a portfolio of commercial real estate assets under a shell company that none of them knew existed. I picked up the piece of bread from my lap and placed it gently on the table. I did not blink. I did not frown. My face was a mask of absolute calm. I reached into my purse. The leather was soft under my fingers. I pulled out my phone and calmly snapped a high-resolution photo of the spreadsheet Patricia had given me. "What are you doing?" Patricia asked, her smile faltering slightly. "Documenting," I said. My voice was steady, void of any emotion. "Thank you, Mother. This admission that my adoption was purely a financial transaction will be very interesting to the IRS. And the family court judge." Patricia scoffed. "Don't threaten me, you ungrateful little brat. You have no money for a lawyer." I ignored her. I reached into my purse again. This time I pulled out a heavy blood-red envelope. It was made of thick, expensive cardstock. I placed it on the table directly on top of their tacky spreadsheet. "Funny you should mention calculations," I said, sliding the red envelope toward the center of the table. "Because I have been doing some accounting of my own." Chanel reached for it, her long acrylic nails clicking against the paper. "Oh, look, she wrote us a sorry letter." How pathetic. She ripped the envelope open. A single bank statement slid out. It was not a spreadsheet from 20 years ago. It was a current statement from a premium credit line. Chanel's eyes widened. She gasped, dropping the paper as if it burned her fingers. "What is this?" Chanel whispered. Her face went pale. Hunter snatched the paper up. $200,000, he read aloud, confusion twisting his face. "Why is there a statement for $200,000 in debt?" I took a sip of water, savoring the cool liquid. "That," I said, pointing a manicured finger at the paper, "is the total amount of credit card debt I have quietly paid off for this family over the last 5 years. The electricity bill for this mansion, paid by me. The property taxes you forgot about 3 years ago, paid by me. Chanel's little incident with the rental car in Miami, paid by me." Patricia stood up, her face turning a blotchy shade of red. "You are lying. You work as a receptionist. You don't have that kind of money." I laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. "Receptionist. Is that what you think I do?" I looked at Hunter. "You really should check who the managing partner is for that investment firm you have been begging for money all week." Hunter dropped the paper. You are the ghost investor." "No, that is impossible," Chanel screeched. "You live in the garden shed. You wear clothes from Walmart." I stood up slowly, smoothing down the skirt of my dress. It looked simple, but it was vintage silk worth more than Chanel's wedding ring. "It is called accumulating capital, Chanel. Something you would know nothing about. I lived in the shed to save money. I wore cheap clothes to avoid your jealousy. But that ends tonight." I looked at Patricia. "You handed me a bill for raising me. Fine. Consider this red envelope my resignation letter. I am stopping all payments. The credit cards you all carry in your wallets. They are supplementary cards linked to my account. I froze them 5 minutes before I walked into this room." Chanel frantically grabbed her purse and pulled out her gold card. She opened the banking app on her phone. Her scream pierced the air. "Declined. It says account closed due to fraud." "It is fraud," I said simply. "You have been defrauding me of my dignity for 30 years. I turned to leave. My heels clicked rhythmically on the hardwood floor. "Get back here," Hunter shouted, standing up and knocking his chair over. He looked menacing, his face twisted with rage. "You think you can just cut us off? You owe us. Where did you get that money, huh? Who did you have to sleep with to get 200 grand? I stopped. I did not turn around immediately. I let the silence stretch, making him sweat. Then I turned my head slightly, looking at him over my shoulder. "Careful, Hunter," I said softly. My voice was dangerous. "I would not talk about sleeping around if I were you. especially since I know exactly how you spent $5,000 at the Sapphire Gentlemen's Club last night." Hunter froze. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He looked terrified at Chanel, who was staring at him with wide, suspicious eyes. "What?" Chanel asked, her voice trembling. "Hunter, what is she talking about?" Hunter stammered, his face turning purple. "She is lying. She is crazy. I didn't stay to watch the fallout. I walked out of the dining room through the foyer that I had scrubbed on my hands and knees 1,000 times and opened the heavy front door. The night air was crisp and cool. Behind me I heard the sound of Chanel screaming and glass shattering. It was the sweetest music I had ever heard. I walked down the driveway. I didn't head toward the garden shed. Instead, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the curb. The driver stepped out and opened the door for me. "To the penthouse, Miss Sterling?" he asked. I looked back at the house one last time. The lights were flickering in the dining room. The war had begun. "Yes," I said, sliding into the leather seat. "And call the lawyers. Initiate phase 2. As the car pulled away, I looked at the photo of the spreadsheet on my phone. They wanted a tax write-off. I was about to audit their entire existence. The digital clock on my nightstand read 3:14 in the morning. Outside, the sky had opened up. A torrential downpour hammered against the thin tin roof of the converted garden shed I called home. It was the kind of storm that drowned out the world, but it could not drown out the violence exploding at my door. The banging was not a knock, it was a battering ram. "Open up, Amara!" My sister Chanel's voice was shrill, cutting through the heavy thunder. "Open this door right now, or Hunter will kick it down." I did not jump. I did not panic. I had been lying awake staring at the ceiling, expecting this, ever since I walked out of that dining room 5 hours ago. You do not hand a narcissist a red envelope of truth without expecting a retaliation. I sat up, slid my feet into my slippers, and grabbed the waterproof hard case sitting by my bed. The flimsy wooden door splintered open before I could even stand up. The lock, which was cheap and rusty, gave way with a sickening crunch. Hunter stood in the frame, soaking wet, his expensive Italian suit clinging to his body. Behind him stood Patricia, holding a heavy flashlight like a weapon, and Chanel, who was holding her phone up, the flash blinding me. She was live streaming. At 3 in the morning in the pouring rain, she was live streaming my humiliation. "Get out," Patricia spat. Her hair was wrapped in a silk scarf to protect it from the humidity, but her eyes were wild. "You think you can threaten us at dinner? You think you can embarrass me in my own house? You are trespassing. This is my property." I stood up slowly. The rain was blowing into the small room now, soaking the cheap rug I had bought at a thrift store. "Technically," I said, keeping my voice low and calm. "Tenant laws give me 30 days' notice, Mother." Patricia let out a screech that sounded like a wounded animal. "Tenant. You are not a tenant. You are a parasite. And parasites get exterminated. Hunter, get her stuff out. Now." Hunter did not wait for a second invitation. He stormed into the room, his muddy boots stomping all over the clean floor I had scrubbed yesterday. He grabbed the pile of clothes on my chair, my work blouses, my slacks, the few nice scarves I owned. He did not pack them. He scooped them up in his arms and heaved them out into the yard. They landed in a puddle of brown mud. I watched as the rain instantly soaked the white fabric of my favorite shirt. "Oops," Hunter laughed, wiping his hands on his pants. "Looks like you need to do laundry." I did not look at the clothes. Material things could be replaced. I moved toward the desk in the corner. There was a small black server unit humming quietly beneath it. It looked like a generic hard drive to them, but inside that box was 5 years of encrypted data. Every illegal wire transfer Patricia had made, every tax document Luther had forged, every penny Hunter had gambled away. It was my insurance policy, and it was worth more than this entire estate. Hunter saw me move toward it. He smirked. "What is that? More trash?" He lunged for the server. I moved faster than I had ever moved in my life. I stepped in front of him, my hand grabbing his wrist with a grip of steel. "Do not touch that," I said. My voice was no longer the voice of Amara the daughter. It was the voice of Amara the ghost investor. Hunter flinched. For a second he looked genuinely afraid. He had never seen me fight back physically. But then his ego took over. He shoved me hard. I stumbled back, hitting my hip against the desk. "Don't touch me, you freak!" Hunter yelled. He grabbed the desk chair and threw it out the door. It crashed against the side of the house. "Get out!" Patricia screamed, stepping inside. She started sweeping the items off my dresser. Perfume bottles shattered on the floor. Books were swept into the rain. "Get out before I call the police and tell them you attacked us." I looked at them. Really looked at them. They were ugly. Not physically, but their souls were rotting. They were destroying the only person who had ever actually tried to save them. "Fine," I said. I grabbed the waterproof case containing the server. I swung my backpack over my shoulder. "I am leaving." I stepped out into the rain. The water was freezing, soaking through my pajamas instantly. My feet sank into the mud. Chanel was laughing, zooming her camera in on my wet hair. "Look at her guys," Chanel said to her phone. The entitlement finally ran out. "This is what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. Say goodbye to the mansion, Amara. Hope you like sleeping under a bridge." I stopped in the middle of the driveway. The rain was matting my hair to my face. I pulled out my phone. It was waterproof, thankfully. I dialed a number I had saved for extreme emergencies. It rang once. Status, a deep voice asked. "Omega Protocol," I said into the phone. "Location secure, hostiles active, extract immediately." I hung up and stood there. Patricia stopped throwing my shoes into the bushes. She squinted at me through the rain. "Who are you calling?" she sneered. "The garbage truck. Tell them to pick you up too." Chanel laughed so hard she almost dropped her phone. "Omega Protocol. Listen to her. She thinks she is in a spy movie. You are delusional, Amara. You are mentally unstable." Hunter walked up to me, puffing out his chest. "You heard your mother. Get off the property. Walk to the bus stop." I didn't move. I counted down in my head. 10, 9, 8. "You are deaf." Hunter raised his hand as if to shove me again. 5, 4, 3. Hunter's hand was inches from my shoulder when the darkness of the driveway was suddenly sliced open. Twin beams of blinding xenon light cut through the rain. A low, powerful rumble shook the wet ground, drowning out the thunder. It wasn't the sound of a taxi engine, it wasn't a police siren, it was the guttural roar of a V8 engine. A matte black SUV tore up the long driveway. It moved with aggressive precision. It swerved around Patricia's flower beds and screeched to a halt just 3 feet from where I stood. The tires were government-grade run flats. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like black mirrors. Hunter jumped back, slipping in the mud and falling on his backside. "What the hell?" Patricia screamed, shielding her eyes from the headlights. "Who is that?" The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. He was not wearing a uniform. He was wearing a bespoke black suit that cost more than Hunter's car. He didn't run. He walked calmly through the torrential rain, opening a large black umbrella. He walked past Hunter, who was sprawling in the mud. He walked past Patricia, who stood with her mouth open. He walked right up to me and held the umbrella over my head, shielding me instantly from the storm. "Good morning, Ms. Sterling," the driver said. His voice was calm, professional. "We have prepared the safe house as requested." He reached for my backpack and the server case. "Allow me." I handed him the case. I looked down at Hunter, who was wiping mud off his face. I looked at Chanel, who had stopped live streaming and was staring at the car with wide, greedy eyes. Is that an armored G-Wagon?" Chanel whispered. I looked at Patricia. She looked terrified. For the first time she realized she didn't know who I was. "You asked me to leave, Mother," I said, my voice cutting through the rain. "So I am leaving. But remember this moment. Remember the mud on your son-in-law's face. Because the next time I step foot on this driveway, I won't be a guest. I will be the owner." I turned and stepped into the back seat of the car. The interior smelled of rich leather and safety. The door closed with a heavy, solid thud, sealing out the rain, the noise, and the toxicity of the family I was leaving behind. As we pulled away, I watched them in the rearview mirror. 3 small, wet figures standing in the mud, shrinking smaller and smaller until the darkness swallowed them whole. The elevator ride to the 45th floor took exactly 20 seconds. It was a private lift accessible only by a biometric scan of my retina. As the doors slid open with a soft, expensive hush, the chaos of the muddy driveway and my mother's screeching voice felt like a lifetime ago. I stepped out onto the polished marble floors of my penthouse. The air here was different. It was filtered cool and smelled of white tea and absolute silence. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls wrapped around the entire living space, offering a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline. Below me, the city was a grid of golden lights, alive and breathing. Somewhere down there in the dark suburbs, the Sterling family was celebrating my departure. Up here, I was looking down on the world they so desperately wanted to be part of. My personal assistant, Julian, was already there. He stood by the kitchen island, dressed in a sharp charcoal suit, looking at his tablet. He did not ask if I was okay. He knew better. He simply nodded toward the temperature-controlled wine cellar. I opened a bottle of Screaming Eagle Cabernet Vintage 1992. It was a $5,000 bottle of wine. Patricia would have had a heart attack just seeing the cork. She drank boxed wine she decanted into crystal pitchers to pretend it was French. I poured a glass, the dark red liquid swirling against the crystal. I took a sip. It tasted like oak, dark fruit, and victory. I walked over to the media wall in the living room. With a single touch of a button, the large abstract painting slid aside to reveal a bank of 6 high-definition monitors. "Julian," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the vast room. "Bring up the audio feeds." "Yes, Miss Sterling." The screens flickered to life. The hidden cameras and microphones I had installed months ago were working perfectly. On the center screen, I saw the living room I had just left. Patricia was sitting on the beige sofa, a towel wrapped around her wet hair. She was holding a large glass of brandy, her hand shaking slightly. "I cannot believe the audacity," Patricia was saying. Her voice came through the speakers crisp and clear. "Tenant rights. Who does she think she is? We fed her, we clothed her, and she threatens us with a lawyer." Chanel was pacing back and forth, still holding her phone, checking the comments on her live stream. "Mom, relax," Chanel said, scrolling through her screen. "The comments are totally on our side. Everyone is saying Amara is ungrateful. Look at this one. User JazzBaby says, I would have kicked her out years ago. See, we are the victims here. Plus, now that she is gone, we can finally renovate that shed. I am thinking a yoga studio. Or maybe a content creation room for my brand." I swirled my wine, watching them. They were already dividing up the carcass of my existence before the body was even cold. Luther, my father, was sitting in his armchair staring at the floor. "She had a lot of stuff," Patricia, Luther mumbled. "Expensive-looking stuff. That computer server. And that car that picked her up." "Did you see the driver?" Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "Probably a drug dealer. Or some older man she is sleeping with. That is the only way a girl like her gets money." "Don't worry about it, Luther. She is gone. The burden is lifted. We can finally focus on our legacy." I let out a short, humorless laugh. Legacy. Their legacy was a mountain of debt and a facade of happiness that was about to crumble. I shifted my attention to the bottom right monitor. It showed the back patio. The rain was still pouring, but a figure was standing under the awning, smoking a cigarette nervously. It was Hunter. "Zoom in on camera 4, I commanded. The image sharpened. Hunter looked terrible. His suit was ruined by the mud. He was pacing tight circles, holding his phone to his ear, his other hand gripping his hair. He looked like a man on the edge of a cliff. I turned up the volume on the directional microphone outside. "Come on, pick up," Hunter whispered into the phone. Finally, someone answered on the other end. I could not hear the other person, but I could hear Hunter's desperation perfectly. "Rocco." Hey, it is Hunter. Yeah, I know I missed the payment last Tuesday. Look, there was a mix-up with the bank. My father-in-law… Yeah. No, please do not come to the house. I took a slow sip of wine. Rocco. That was not the name of a bank manager. That was the name of a loan shark. Hunter's voice rose an octave, cracking with panic. I just need 48 hours. The crypto market is crashing. I just got margin called. I need to cover the position or I lose everything. I need 500 grand to float the account until the market corrects. Yes, I have collateral. My wife's family. They have assets. I can get you the deed to a vacation home. Just give me the bridge loan. He paused, listening. 18% interest. That is insane, Hunter hissed. Then he slumped against the wall, defeated. Fine, fine. Send the contract. I will sign anything. Just wire the cash by tomorrow morning. He hung up the phone and threw his cigarette butt into the wet grass. He stood there for a moment, shaking before putting on a fake smile and walking back into the house to join his wife. I muted the screens. The room fell silent again. I walked over to the window, looking at my reflection in the glass. I saw a woman who had been discarded, undervalued, and mocked. But I also saw a predator who had just spotted a wounded gazelle. Hunter needs $500,000, I said softly, and he is willing to sign over the Florida vacation home to get it. Julian looked up from his tablet. Do you want me to flag the transaction to his bank? Block it. I turned around, a cold smile playing on my lips. No, Julian, why would I block it? I want to facilitate it. I walked over to the kitchen island and set my wine glass down. Hunter is looking for a lender. He is desperate. He is not checking credentials. He just wants the money. I tapped my fingers on the marble counter. Activate the shell company, Ghost Ventures, LLC. Send an encrypted email to Hunter's personal account. Subject line: investment opportunity. Tell him we heard about his startup through the grapevine. Tell him we specialize in high-risk, high-reward bridge loans for tech entrepreneurs. Julian began typing rapidly. And the terms, Julian asked. Offer him the full 500,000, I said. Interest rate? Let's make it attractive, 10%. Much better than Rocco's 18. But here is the catch. I leaned in closer, my eyes locking with Julian's. I want the collateral clause to be ironclad, immediate foreclosure upon a single missed payment. And I want the collateral to be the vacation home in Florida, the one Patricia loves more than she loves her own children. Julian stopped typing and looked at me. That property is in Luther's name. Hunter cannot pledge it. He will, I said confidently. He is a con artist and a desperate man. He will forge their signatures or trick them into signing a power of attorney. He thinks he is a genius who is just one trade away from being a billionaire. He will risk it all. Julian finished typing and hovered his finger over the send button. The email is ready. Miss Sterling, are you sure you want to be the one holding the debt? I picked up my wine glass again and walked back to the screens. I watched Hunter inside the house, now laughing loudly, pouring himself a drink, thinking he had solved his problem. He had no idea he was about to sign a deal with the devil. Send it, I whispered. Julian tapped the screen. Sent. On the monitor, I saw Hunter's phone light up in his pocket. He pulled it out. I watched his eyes widen as he read the notification. I watched the relief wash over his face. He showed the screen to Chanel, who clapped her hands in delight. They were celebrating their salvation. They did not know it was actually their execution order. Hunter needs a bank, Julian, I said, taking a final sip of the $5,000 wine. And starting tomorrow morning, I am not just his sister-in-law. I am his owner. The morning sun did not bring warmth to the Sterling estate. It only illuminated the mud stains on the driveway where my belongings had been thrown the night before. Inside the house, the air was thick with panic. I sat in my penthouse 45 floors above them, watching the chaos unfold on my monitor like a reality show I produced, directed, and scripted. Hunter was sitting at the kitchen island, his head in his hands. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot from a sleepless night of checking crypto charts that continued to bleed red. He had ignored 3 calls from Rocco, the loan shark, in the last hour. I could practically smell the fear sweating off him through the screen. Chanel was pacing this kitchen in a silk robe, aggressively tapping on her phone. "My credit card was declined at Starbucks, Hunter," she hissed. "Do you hear me, Starbucks? A $5 coffee. It is humiliating. You said you would fix this. I am working on it." Hunter snapped, his voice cracking. I took a sip of my espresso and leaned toward my laptop. It was time to cast the line. "Julian," I said without looking away from the screen, "send the email now." 3 seconds later, I saw Hunter's phone buzz on the marble countertop. He ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. Finally, he picked it up with a groan, expecting another threat from Rocco. I watched his expression shift. His eyebrows shot up. His mouth opened. He sat up straighter, the color rushing back into his pale face. "Oh my God," Hunter whispered. "What?" Chanel asked, stopping her pacing. "Is it bad news?" "No," Hunter said, his voice trembling with excitement. "It is. It is a miracle. Chanel, get your parents. Get them in here right now." He jumped off the stool, practically knocking it over. "I have saved us. I am a genius. I knew my network would come through." 10 minutes later, the 4 of them were gathered around the kitchen island. Luther looked tired, his age showing in the deep lines around his mouth. Patricia looked anxious, clutching her pearl necklace as if it could protect her from bankruptcy. "Listen to me," Hunter began, pacing back and forth like a manic preacher. "I reached out to some exclusive contacts in the private equity sector last night. High-level people. They specialize in distressed assets and bridge loans for tech unicorns." He held up his phone. "Ghost Ventures. They are a boutique firm out of Zurich. Very private, very exclusive. They just emailed me back. They have analyzed my portfolio and they see the potential. They know the market is going to rebound." He paused for effect. "They are offering a $500,000 liquidity injection. Immediate wire transfer. Today." Patricia let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for hours. "Oh, thank the Lord. 500,000. That covers everything. It covers the margin. Call, it covers the credit cards. It covers everything," Hunter said, puffing out his chest. "I told you not to worry. I told you I had a handle on this." Luther, however, was not smiling. He had worked in banking for 30 years before retiring. He squinted at Hunter. "Ghost Ventures. I have never heard of them, and nobody lends $500,000 without terms, Hunter." "What is the catch? What is the interest rate?" Hunter waved his hand dismissively. "The interest is 10%. Standard for high-risk bridge loans. Actually, it is generous." "And the collateral?" Luther asked sharply. I leaned forward in my chair. This was the moment. Hunter hesitated. He licked his lips. "Well, obviously for a sum this large they need a tangible asset to secure the note. Since the crypto assets are currently volatile, they require real estate collateral." "What real estate?" Patricia asked, her voice sharpening. "Not this house. We still have a mortgage on this house." "No, not this house," Hunter said quickly. "They want the deed to the vacation property in Destin, Florida." Silence fell over the kitchen. I smiled. The Florida house. It was a pristine beachfront villa that had been in Luther's family for 2 generations. It was their pride and joy. It was where they spent every Christmas. It was the only asset they owned outright with no debt attached. "Absolutely not," Luther said, slamming his hand on the counter. "That is our retirement, Hunter. That house is worth $1.2 million. I am not risking it on your internet coins." Hunter's face turned red. The nice guy mask slipped, revealing the arrogant condescension underneath. "Luther, listen to me." Hunter said, his tone changing. He spoke slowly, as if talking to a slow child. "You do not understand how the blockchain works. This is not gambling. This is the future of finance. The market is just in a temporary correction. In 2 weeks, my portfolio will double. I will pay off the loan, we keep the house, and we walk away with $1 million in profit. It is too risky, Luther insisted. Risky Hunter laughed a cruel, mocking sound. You know what is risky. Being broke. Do you want to lose this mansion? Because without this cash, the bank takes this house next month. Amara cut off the cash flow. Remember? Patricia gasped. Is that true? Of course it is true. Hunter lied smoothly. We need liquidity now. Look, I know you guys are old school. You think savings accounts and bonds are smart. But that is why you are stagnant. I am trying to build generational wealth here. Do not let your fear hold me back. He turned to Chanel. Baby, tell them. Tell them to trust me. Chanel looked at her parents. She did not care about blockchain. She did not care about the Florida house. She just wanted her credit cards to work again. Daddy, please. Chanel whined. Hunter knows what he is doing. He is the smartest person we know. Do you really want us to be humiliated? Do you want the neighbors to see the repo man taking our cars? Just sign the paper. Luther looked at Patricia. Patricia looked at the ceiling, then at Hunter. If we sign, the money comes today, Patricia asked. Within the hour, Hunter promised. I will pay it back in 30 days. I swear. You won't even know the lien was there. Luther sighed. It was the sound of a man surrendering his last shred of dignity. Fine, Luther whispered. Where do I sign? Hunter scrambled to his iPad. He pulled up the document I had attached to the email. It was a digital deed of trust with a clause on page 4 that allowed for immediate foreclosure without a judicial hearing in the event of default. It was a death warrant for their asset, and they were about to sign it. Here, just press your finger here, Hunter said, guiding Luther's trembling hand to the screen. And here. Okay now, Mom. I watched as Patricia pressed her thumb against the glass screen. Done, Hunter shouted. He hit submit. On my laptop in the penthouse, a notification popped up. Document signed, deed of trust, 440 Ocean Boulevard, Destin, Florida. I opened the banking portal for Ghost Ventures. The transfer was queued up. $500,000. It was a lot of money to lose, but I wasn't losing it. I was buying a $1.2 million house for less than half price, and I was buying the destruction of my brother-in-law. I looked at Hunter's face on the monitor. He was hugging Chanel, jumping up and down. He looked like he had just won the lottery. He had no idea he had just sold his soul to the sister-in-law he threw out in the rain. I hovered my mouse over the approve transfer button. Enjoy the money, Hunter, I whispered to the empty room. Spend it fast, because the clock starts now. I clicked the mouse. Transaction successful. Funds released. On the screen, Hunter's phone pinged. He screamed in victory. We are back in business, baby, Hunter yelled, popping a bottle of champagne. I sat back in my chair and watched them toast. My expression remained flat, cold, and unmoving. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now all I had to do was wait for the inevitable crash. And when it happened, I would be there to collect not just the money, but everything they had left. The notification on my banking dashboard blinked green. $185,000. Debit. Porsche dealership of North Atlanta. I sat in my penthouse living room watching the security feed from the Sterling estate. It had been exactly 24 hours since I wired the $500,000 loan to Hunter's account. A smart man would have used that money to cover his margin calls. A cautious man would have put it into a high-yield savings account to pay back the principal. Hunter was neither smart nor cautious. Hunter was a child with a loaded gun, and he had just pulled the trigger on his own foot. On the center monitor, I saw a flash of obnoxious lizard-green paint turn into the driveway. The roar of a twin-turbo engine shattered the peace of the quiet suburban neighborhood. It was a brand-new Porsche 911 GT3. Hunter was driving it like he was qualifying for Daytona, swerving dangerously close to the mailbox before slamming on the brakes in front of the front steps. He stepped out of the car wearing sunglasses, even though it was overcast. He looked like a caricature of a successful man. He patted the hood of the car, grinning so wide it looked painful. Chanel came running out of the front door, squealing. "Oh my God!" Chanel screamed, her voice piercing through my speakers. Is that it? Is that ours? Hunter opened the passenger door and pulled out a bright orange box. The distinct packaging of Hermes. For the queen of the castle, Hunter announced, handing her the box. Chanel tore it open right there in the driveway. She pulled out a Birkin bag, the leather dark and supple. It was easily a $20,000 bag. Between the car and the bag, he had just burned through almost half of the loan in a single afternoon. I deserve this. Chanel sighed, hugging the bag to her chest. After everything that witch Amara put us through, we deserve a treat. Investment in image, baby, Hunter said, leaning against the car. You have to look rich to get rich. Ghost Ventures knows that. That is why they backed me. They see the vision. I took a sip of my sparkling water. The vision. The only vision I saw was a train wreck in slow motion. By 7 that evening, the house was full of people. They had thrown a spontaneous victory party. The driveway was lined with BMWs and Mercedes as their shallow friends arrived to drink their champagne and eat their hors d'oeuvres. Patricia was in her element. She moved through the crowd in the living room, holding a glass of Prosecco, telling anyone who would listen about Hunter's financial genius. Yes, it is a private equity firm from Switzerland, Patricia boasted loudly. They headhunted Hunter. They said they had never seen a portfolio with such potential. We are looking at properties in the Hamptons for next summer. I watched her from my screen. The Hamptons. She was currently standing in a house that was technically mortgaged to the hilt, celebrating a loan she had secured with a house she was about to lose. The delusion was breathtaking. I picked up my phone. It was time to send my regards. Julian, I said into the speakerphone. Has the florist arrived? Just pulling up now? Julian confirmed. On the security monitor, I saw a delivery van navigate through the crowded driveway. A delivery man walked up to the front door carrying a massive, towering arrangement. It was not festive. It was not colorful. It was 3 dozen black baccarat roses, flowers so dark red they looked almost black, surrounded by sharp architectural greenery. It looked beautiful, expensive, and ominous. Hunter opened the door, a glass of scotch in his hand. Whoa, Hunter said, stepping back. Who sent these? The delivery man handed him a small card. Hunter plucked it from the envelope. He read it, and a confused look crossed his face for a split second before his ego took over. He walked into the center of the living room, clapping his hands to get attention. Everyone. Listen up, Hunter shouted over the music. The room went quiet. Hunter held up the black card. My partners at Ghost Ventures just sent this. Listen to this note. He cleared his throat and read aloud. To Hunter. Success is a race against time. Enjoy the ride while the engine is running. Tick-tock. The guests cheered. Chanel clapped her hands. That is so cool, Chanel yelled. Tick-tock. That means keep grinding, right, baby? Hunter grinned, raising his glass. Exactly. Time is money. They want me to hustle. They know I am a shark. To Ghost Ventures. To Ghost Ventures, the room chorused. I watched them drink. I watched them laugh. Hunter thought the note was a motivational quote. He did not realize it was a warning. Tick-tock did not mean hustle. It meant his time was up. I turned to my laptop. I opened the secure email server for Ghost Ventures. Hunter had spent $200,000 on toys. He had $0 invested in the market. He had violated the terms of the loan within 24 hours. The contract stated that the funds were to be used strictly for business capital and asset acquisition. A Porsche was not a business asset for a crypto trader. A Birkin bag was not capital. I began to type. From Ghost Ventures Risk Management Department to hunter.s@sterlinginvestments.com. Subject, urgent, weekly, capital allocation audit. Dear Mr. Sterling, per the terms of your bridge loan agreement, Ghost Ventures utilizes an automated tracking system for all dispersed funds. Our algorithms have flagged several large transactions in the last 12 hours that do not appear to align with the approved investment strategy outlined in your proposal. Please provide the following within 60 minutes. 1. Proof of crypto asset purchase for the transaction labeled Porsche North Atlanta. 2. Investment thesis for the transaction labeled Hermes Boutique. 3. A screenshot of your current trading wallet balance showing the remaining $300,000. Failure to provide these documents will trigger an immediate default event under Section 8, Paragraph C of your contract. This will result in the immediate acceleration of the loan, meaning the full $500,000 plus interest is due immediately. TikTok. Regards the ghost. I hit send. I leaned back and watched the monitor. The party was in full swing. Hunter was dancing with Chanel, looking like he owned the world. Then he felt the vibration in his pocket. He pulled out his phone, laughing at something his friend said. He glanced at the screen. I watched the color drain from his face. It started at his cheeks and washed down to his neck. He stopped dancing. He stopped smiling. The glass of scotch in his hand tilted dangerously. "What is wrong?" Chanel asked, noticing his sudden freeze. Hunter didn't answer. He read the email again. And again. I could see his lips moving, reading the words. Proof of asset purchase. Default event. Immediate acceleration. He looked around the room at the expensive flowers, the expensive car in the driveway, the expensive bag on the couch. He realized with sudden terrifying clarity that the partners he had been bragging about were watching him. He looked up at the ceiling as if looking for a hidden camera. He looked right into the lens of the smoke detector I had bugged. Hunter ran a hand through his hair, messing up his perfect gelled look. He grabbed Chanel's arm a little too hard. "We need to go to the office," he whispered harshly. "What?" Why? Chanel pulled back. "We are partying." "Now," Hunter hissed. His eyes were wide with panic. He dragged her toward the kitchen, leaving his guests confused. I unmuted the kitchen camera. "They are asking for a screenshot." Hunter was hyperventilating, leaning over the counter. "They know." "How do they know I haven't even moved the money to the trading account yet?" "Just tell them you are waiting for the transfer to clear," Chanel said, annoyed. "God, Hunter, stop being so paranoid." "You don't understand," Hunter yelled, slamming his hand on the marble. "They want proof that the Porsche is a business expense. How am I supposed to prove that?" Chanel shrugged. "Photoshop it. You are good with computers. Just make a fake receipt." Hunter stared at her. "Photoshop it." "This is a Swiss equity firm, Chanel. If I send a fake document, that is wire fraud. That is prison time." "Then pay them back," Chanel said. "Just give them the money back and tell them to go to hell." "I can't," Hunter screamed. "I already spent 200 grand. I only have 300 left. If they call the loan, I am short $200,000. Silence fell over the kitchen. The music from the living room thumped in the background, a cruel soundtrack to their demise. "Then what happens?" Chanel whispered, her voice trembling. Hunter looked at her, his eyes filled with tears of terror. "Then they take the Florida house," he said. "They take your parents' retirement home, and they sue us for fraud." I watched them from my tower. The party was still going on outside, but inside the kitchen the walls were closing in. I picked up my phone and typed a text message to Julian. "Prepare the foreclosure notice. Have it delivered by courier at 9 a.m. tomorrow." Hunter thought he was playing a game. He didn't realize he had already lost. The Porsche in the driveway wasn't a trophy, it was a hearse. The annual benevolence gala for the Greater Atlanta Faith Foundation was the Super Bowl of the Black elite social calendar. It was not just a fundraiser. It was a battlefield where status was measured in the size of the check you wrote and the proximity of your seat to the stage. Tonight, the ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel was dripping in gold leaf and white orchids. 500 of the city's most influential movers and shakers sat at round tables sipping sparkling cider and judging each other's outfits. At the center of it all, standing on the elevated stage behind a lucite podium, was my mother, Patricia Sterling. She looked every inch the matriarch she pretended to be. She wore a silver sequined gown that cost more than my college tuition. Her hair was coiffed into a stiff, perfect helmet. She gripped the microphone with manicured hands, beaming down at the congregation with a smile that did not quite reach her cold, calculating eyes. "We must open our hearts," Patricia crooned, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "We must open our homes to the less fortunate. When my husband and I took in our adopted daughter 30 years ago, we didn't do it for praise. We did it because love is a verb. It is an action. It is about sacrifice." I stood at the back of the ballroom, hidden in the shadows of the velvet curtains. The audacity was breathtaking. 3 days ago, this woman had thrown my clothes into the mud and called me a tax write-off. Now she was using my existence to solicit donations for her presidency campaign for the foundation board. I adjusted the strap of my gown. Tonight I was not wearing Walmart slacks. I was wearing a custom Oscar de la Renta gown in deep emerald green, the color of money, the color of envy. It clung to my body like liquid armor. My hair was swept up in a regal chignon, revealing the diamond drop earrings that caught the light from the crystal chandeliers. Beside me stood Mayor Franklin. He offered me his arm. "Ready to make an entrance, Ms. Sterling?" he asked with a warm smile. I took his arm. "I was born ready, Mr. Mayor." The double doors swung open. We stepped into the light. At first, only a few heads turned. Then a ripple of whispers started at the back tables and moved forward like a wave. People stopped eating. Waiters stopped pouring water. The sight of the mayor of Atlanta was always a showstopper, but it was the woman on his arm that had everyone confused. "Is that Amara?" I heard a woman whisper as we walked down the center aisle. "It can't be. She looks expensive." I walked with my head high. I did not look at the floor. I looked straight ahead at the stage-locking eyes with Patricia. She faltered. She actually stopped mid-sentence. The microphone picked up her sharp intake of breath. Her eyes widened, scanning my dress, the diamonds, the mayor. For a second, the mask slipped, and pure, unadulterated panic flashed across her face. Mayor Franklin led me to table 1, the VIP table, the table right in front of the podium, the table where Luther was sitting next to an empty chair reserved for the bishop. The mayor pulled out the chair for me. I sat down, smoothing my silk skirt. I looked up at Patricia and offered her a small, polite wave. "Please continue, Mother," I mouthed silently. Patricia gripped the podium so hard her knuckles turned white. She stammered through the rest of her speech, skipping 3 paragraphs, and practically ran off the stage. As soon as the applause died down, she didn't go to her seat. She made a beeline for me. She marched across the ballroom floor, her silver dress swishing aggressively. She leaned down, putting her hand on the back of my chair, her nails digging into the fabric. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, keeping her voice low so the people around us wouldn't hear the venom. "You were not invited. This is a private event for donors. Get out before I have security drag you out. You are making a scene." I picked up my glass of water and took a delicate sip. I didn't look at her. I looked at the stage where the choir was setting up. "I believe I have every right to be here, Patricia," I said calmly. Patricia's face turned purple. "You have no rights here. You are a nobody. You are embarrassing me in front of the mayor. Leave. Now." She reached for my arm to physically pull me up. "Ms. Sterling." The booming voice of Mayor Franklin stopped her hand in midair. He turned in his seat, looking at Patricia with a confused expression. "Is there a problem, Mrs. Sterling?" "I was just telling your daughter how grateful the city is for her contribution." Patricia froze. She looked from the mayor to me, then back to the mayor. "Contribution," Patricia squeaked. Her voice was thin and reedy. "Mayor, I think there is a misunderstanding. Amara she is currently unemployed. She can't afford a ticket to this dinner." The mayor laughed. It was a hearty belly laugh that drew the attention of the nearby tables. "Unemployed, Patricia, your daughter is the mysterious donor behind the new community center project in the 4th Ward. And she just pledged $50,000 to the foundation tonight. She is our new diamond sponsor." The world stopped spinning for Patricia Sterling. I watched the blood drain from her face, leaving her looking gray and old under the harsh ballroom lights. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. 50,000, she whispered. I turned to her finally. I smiled the same cold smile she had given me on my birthday. Surprise, I said softly. I decided to take your advice, Mother. You said love is an action. You said it is about sacrifice. So I decided to sacrifice some of my pocket change to help your little club. Patricia looked like she was going to faint. She grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself, where she stammered. Where did you get $50,000? I leaned in closer. Ghost Ventures had a good quarter. The mention of the company name hit her like a physical slap. She knew the name. It was the company that had just loaned Hunter the money. The realization began to dawn on her, the pieces of the puzzle clicking together in a horrifying picture. Before she could speak, a flash went off. Mrs. Sterling, Miss Sterling. Over here. It was the society photographer for the Atlanta Tribune. He was waving at us. Let's get a photo of the foundation president and the new diamond sponsor. This is a beautiful family moment. Patricia tried to back away. No, I need to powder my nose. But the mayor was already standing up. Nonsense, Patricia. Come on, let's celebrate this generosity. He put one arm around me and one arm around Patricia, locking her in place. She was trapped. She had to smile. If she ran away now, she would look insane. If she frowned, she would look ungrateful. She forced a rictus grin onto her face, her eyes filled with terror. I leaned my head close to hers, posing for the camera. I could smell her fear. It smelled like stale hairspray and sweat. Smile. Mother, I whispered, my lips barely moving. Make it a good one. Because this is going to be the last photo you ever take as president of this foundation. By tomorrow morning, everyone in this room will know you embezzled the orphan fund. The flashbulb exploded, blinding and white. Click. I pulled away, leaving her standing there shaking in her silver sequins. Thank you, gentlemen, I said to the photographer and the mayor. Now, if you will excuse me, I see the bishop over there. I have some very interesting documents regarding charitable tax fraud that I think he needs to see. I walked away, the train of my emerald dress trailing behind me like a predator's tail. I didn't look back, but I heard the sound of glass shattering. Patricia had dropped her wine glass. Red liquid spread across the white carpet, looking exactly like a fresh wound. The waiters were clearing the salad plates and serving the filet mignon, but at table 3 nobody was eating. All eyes were glued to the center of the table where my sister Chanel had placed her new orange Hermes box like it was a religious artifact. She had pushed the centerpiece of white orchids aside to make room for it. She was holding court, surrounded by the daughters of Atlanta's elite women she had been trying to impress since middle school. It is a Birkin 30 in Togo leather, Chanel announced, her voice pitched high enough for the neighboring tables to hear. Hunter got it for me to celebrate his massive business deal. You know how it is. The waiting list is 5 years, but when you have connections like we do, doors just open. She opened the box with theatrical slowness, peeling back the tissue paper to reveal the black leather bag with gold hardware. The women around her cooed and gasped on cue. It is stunning, Chanel, one of them said, reaching out to touch it. Careful. Chanel slapped the girl's hand away playfully, but with serious intent. Oils from your skin can damage the finish. This is an investment piece. It is worth more than a car. I stood near the bar watching this display of vanity. Beside me stood Elena, a close friend, and one of the country's leading authenticators for luxury auction houses. I had flown her in from New York specifically for this moment. Is that the bag? Elena asked, taking a sip of her martini. That is the bag, I confirmed. Hunter bought it from a trunk of a car in a parking lot thinking he was getting a steal. He paid $5,000 cash for a bag that retails for $20,000. He thinks he is a negotiator. He is actually a mark. Elena adjusted her glasses. It looks good from a distance, but under these lights I can see the resin glazing from here. It is too shiny. Showtime, I whispered. Elena nodded and set her drink down. She smoothed her black dress and walked toward table 3 with the confidence of a woman who could spot a fake from a mile away. I followed a few steps behind, staying in the shadows. Elena approached the table, just as Chanel was lifting the bag up to pose for a selfie. "Excuse me," Elena said loudly. Her voice cut through the chatter. Chanel lowered the phone, looking annoyed. "Yes, can I help you?" Elena smiled. It was a sharp, professional smile. "I could not help but notice your bag from across the room. I am Elena Ross, Senior Authenticator for Christie's Auction House. I specialize in Hermes leather goods." Chanel's annoyance turned into preening pride. "Oh, well, thank you. It is beautiful, isn't it? My husband just bought it." Elena leaned in closer, squinting at the gold hardware. "May I?" Elena asked, not waiting for an answer. She reached out and inspected the lock. Then she ran her finger along the stitching on the handle. The table went silent. The women watched with bated breath. Having an expert admire your bag was the ultimate status symbol. But Elena did not look admiring. She looked confused. Then she looked sympathetic. "Oh dear," Elena said loud enough for the table behind them to hear. "Oh, you poor thing." Chanel's smile faltered. "What? What do you mean?" Elena pulled her hand back as if the bag was contaminated. "This is a super fake," Elena announced. "And not even a very good one. The stitching is machine-made. Hermes uses a saddle stitch that is done by hand. See how this thread is perfectly straight? That is a sewing machine. And the hardware? This is plated brass, not gold. It is already starting to oxidize." The silence in the ballroom spread like a virus. Forks stopped midway to mouths. The mayor turned around in his seat. Patricia, who was sitting at the next table, stood up, her face draining of color. "Excuse me," Chanel laughed, but it was a nervous, high-pitched sound. "You do not know what you are talking about. My husband paid $20,000 for this bag." "Then your husband was robbed," Elena said simply. "Or he is lying to you, because this bag is worth maybe $200 on Canal Street. The smell alone gives it away. It smells like chemicals, not leather." Someone at the next table snickered. Then someone else giggled. Within seconds, the ripple of laughter started. The wealthy women who Chanel had been trying to impress were now covering their mouths, whispering behind their manicured hands. "Did you hear that fake? Imagine bringing a knockoff to the gala. How embarrassing." Chanel looked around wildly, her face burning a deep, blotchy red. She grabbed the bag, clutching it to her chest as if to protect it from the words. "It is real. Stop looking at me. It is real." Hunter, who had been at the bar bragging to a group of investors, came running over. He saw his wife surrounded, crying, and the room laughing. The alcohol in his system mixed with his fragile ego, creating a volatile cocktail. "Hey," Hunter shouted, pushing past a waiter. "Who is upsetting my wife?" He stormed up to Elena, getting right in her face. He smelled of scotch and desperation. "What did you say to her?" Hunter demanded, jabbing a finger at Elena. "I just informed her that she is carrying a counterfeit item," Elena replied coolly. "I thought she should know before she embarrassed herself further." "Counterfeit," Hunter roared. "I bought that from a private dealer. It is 100% authentic." "You don't know who I am. I am a partner at Ghost Ventures Security." I signaled to the large men standing by the exit. Two massive security guards in black suits materialized instantly. They stepped between Hunter and Elena, blocking his path. "Sir, you need to lower your voice," the head guard said. "Don't touch me," Hunter screamed, his face turning purple. "These people are liars. That bag is real. We are rich. Tell them, Chanel. Tell them we are rich." Chanel was sobbing now, mascara running down her face. She looked at Hunter, then at the bag, then at the laughing crowd. She realized the truth. She knew deep down that Hunter was a fraud, and now everyone else knew it too. "It is fake, isn't it?" Chanel whispered, her voice breaking. "You bought me a fake bag." Hunter froze. "Baby, no," the dealer said. "Amara." Patricia's voice shrieked across the room. She was pointing at me. "She set this up. I saw her talking to this woman. This is her fault." I stepped out of the shadows. The spotlight hit my emerald dress. I walked calmly toward the chaos, the crowd parting for me like the Red Sea. I stopped in front of Chanel, who was huddled in her chair, clutching the fake bag like a life preserver. I looked at Hunter, who was being held back by security. I looked at Patricia, who was trembling with rage. "I didn't set anything up, Mother," I said, my voice smooth and projected for the whole room to hear. "I simply brought an expert to the party. The truth did the rest." "You did this on purpose," Chanel screamed, standing up and throwing the bag at me. It hit my shoulder and fell to the floor with a hollow thud. "You are jealous! You are just a jealous, bitter little orphan!" I looked down at the bag on the floor. The gold clasp had popped open, revealing the cheap lining inside. I looked up at Chanel. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "I am not jealous, Chanel. I am disappointed." I stepped closer to her, invading her personal space. "You know that bag is actually perfect for you. It really is." Chanel blinked, confused by the sudden shift in my tone. I gestured to the heap of fake leather on the floor. "It is a cheap imitation wrapped in a fancy label," I said, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper that the microphone still picked up. "It looks expensive from a distance, but up close the cracks show. It smells like desperation. And just like you, sister. The outside is shiny, but the inside is completely empty." The room gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the ballroom. Hunter lunged at me. "I will kill you." The security guard slammed him onto the carpet before he got within 3 feet of me. He was pinned down, grunting and swearing, his tuxedo jacket ripping at the shoulder. "Get them out of here," the mayor ordered, stepping up beside me. "They are disrupting the event." "No," Patricia cried, grabbing the mayor's sleeve. "Franklin, please. It is a misunderstanding. We are donors." "Not anymore," Patricia the mayor said coldly, pulling his arm away. I watched as the security guards hauled Hunter to his feet. They grabbed Chanel by the arm. She was kicking and screaming, dragging her heels, leaving the fake Hermes bag abandoned on the floor. "I hate you!" Chanel screamed at me as they dragged her toward the exit. "I hope you die alone." I stood still, watching them disappear through the double doors. The silence in the room was heavy, thick with shock. I bent down and picked up the fake bag. I walked over to the nearest trash can, a silver, elegant bin near the dessert table. With a casual flick of my wrist, I dropped the bag into the trash. "Oops," I said into the silence. "Looks like I took out the trash twice tonight." I turned back to the room, picked up a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, and raised it to the stunned crowd. "Please, everyone," I said with a dazzling smile, "do not let this interrupt dessert. The chocolate mousse is authentic, unlike my family." I took a sip, and for the first time that night, the applause that followed was for me. It was hesitant at first, then loud, thunderous, and approving. I had not just won the battle, I had won the war for public opinion. And the night was not even over. The morning after the benevolence gala, Patricia Sterling put on her largest pair of oversized Chanel sunglasses to hide the puffiness around her eyes. She had not slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the flash of the photographer's camera and the smug, cold smile on my face. But Patricia was a woman of routine, and she was a master of denial. In her mind, if she continued her daily rituals, the nightmare of the previous night would simply fade away like a bad dream. She drove her Mercedes SUV to the Whole Foods in Buckhead. This was her territory. This was where she ran into the other wives of the foundation board, where they compared organic produce and discussed their vacation plans. She wanted to be seen. She wanted to project an image of unbothered opulence. She grabbed a cart and marched through the automatic doors, the blast of air conditioning hitting her face. She did not need groceries. The refrigerator at the mansion was full. But she needed to spend money. Spending money was the only way Patricia knew how to self-soothe. It was her drug of choice. She moved through the aisles, tossing items into the cart with reckless abandon. A jar of imported Manuka honey for $80, a bottle of truffle oil, 3 pounds of wild-caught Alaskan salmon, a wheel of aged brie cheese. She was building a fortress of expensive food to protect her fragile ego. She told herself that Amara was bluffing. There was no way I had that kind of power. I was just acting out, throwing a tantrum. Hunter would fix the loan issue. The gala scandal would blow over. People had short memories. She reached the checkout counter. The lane was busy. Behind her stood a woman in yoga pants holding a green juice, and behind her was a businessman in a suit checking his watch. Patricia did not acknowledge them. She started unloading her premium goods onto the conveyor belt, making sure the labels were facing out so everyone could see she bought the best. The cashier was a young woman with purple hair and a nose ring. She scanned the items slowly, the beep of the register creating a rhythmic soundtrack to Patricia's anxiety. Your total is $642.18, the cashier said, popping her gum. Patricia smiled, her practiced, condescending smile. She reached into her Louis Vuitton wallet and pulled out her heavy platinum American Express card. It was the card she used for everything. The card that signaled she was a woman of substance. She tapped it against the reader. Processing. Patricia tapped her manicured fingernails against the counter, waiting for the familiar chime of approval. Buzz. The machine made a low, harsh sound. A red light flashed on the screen. Decline, the cashier said flatly. Patricia frowned. She pushed her sunglasses up onto her head. That is impossible, she said. Try it again. It is probably the chip reader. These machines are always faulty. She inserted the card into the slot this time, shoving it in with a little too much force. Processing. Buzz. Not authorized. The screen read in bright red letters. The cashier sighed. It is not the machine, ma'am. The bank is declining the charge. Do you have another form of payment? Patricia felt a prickle of heat on the back of her neck. The woman in yoga pants behind her shifted her weight and checked her phone loudly. There must be a mistake, Patricia snapped. She pulled out her gold Visa card. This one has a $50,000 limit. Run this one. She tapped the Visa. Buzz. Declined. The heat was spreading now, moving from her neck to her cheeks. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs. This could not be happening. Not here. Not in front of these people. She pulled out her emergency MasterCard, the one she kept for travel. Run it, she commanded, her voice rising an octave. Buzz. Declined. Pick up card. Contact issuer. The cashier stopped popping her gum. She looked at Patricia with a mix of pity and annoyance. The look was devastating. It was the look you gave to someone who was trying to buy things they could not afford. Ma'am, do you have cash? The cashier asked. Or maybe a debit card, cash. Patricia sputtered. I do not carry $600 in cash. Who do you think I am? From the line behind her, the businessman spoke up. Lady, if you are broke, just move aside. I have a meeting to get to. Patricia whipped around. I am not broke. I am Patricia Sterling. My husband is a banker. The businessman rolled his eyes. Yeah, and my dad is the president. Move it. Patricia looked at the cart full of salmon and truffle oil. She looked at the cashier waiting for payment. She looked at the line of people staring at her with judgment. The walls of the grocery store seemed to be closing in on her. Cancel the order, Patricia whispered. What? The cashier asked. I said cancel the order, Patricia screamed. She grabbed her purse and turned around, abandoning the cart right there in the lane. She walked past the businessman, past the yoga mom, past the security guard at the door. It was the longest walk of her life. She could feel their eyes on her back, burning holes in her silk blouse. She practically ran to her car, fumbling with her keys. She jumped inside and locked the doors, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She pulled her phone out of her purse. Her hands were shaking so badly, she could barely dial the number on the back of her platinum card. Welcome to American Express, the automated voice said cheerfully. Representative Patricia yelled at the phone. Representative. After 3 agonizing minutes of hold music, a human voice came on the line. Thank you for calling Platinum Services. My name is David. How can I assist you today? David, this is Patricia Sterling, she said, trying to regain her composure. I am at the grocery store and my card was just declined. It was embarrassing. You need to fix this immediately. Whatever fraud alert you put on my account, remove it. There was a pause. The sound of typing on a keyboard. "One moment, Mrs. Sterling. Let me pull up the account." Patricia waited, watching the shoppers walk out of the store with their bags of food. She felt sick. "Okay, I see the account here," David said. His tone had changed. It was no longer friendly. It was formal, guarded. "Mrs. Sterling, I see that these cards have been reported lost or stolen as of 8 a.m. this morning." "Lost," Patricia said. "I did not report them lost. I have them right here in my hand, I understand that, ma'am," David said. However, the primary account holder called in and requested that all supplementary cards be deactivated immediately due to a security breach. She also requested that the account numbers be changed and the new cards be mailed to a different address. Primary account holder. Patricia frowned. "What are you talking about? My husband Luther is the primary." "I am looking at the file right now, ma'am," David corrected her. "This account was opened 5 years ago. The primary holder, the person who is liable for the debt and controls the credit line, is Ms. Amara Sterling." The name hit Patricia like a physical blow. The air left her lungs. "Amara," she whispered. "No. That is my daughter. She is just an authorized user. I am the mother. I am the one who spends the money." "Mrs. Sterling," David said, his voice firm. "You are listed as a supplementary user. Ms. Amara Sterling has excellent credit and a very high limit. You have been utilizing her credit line, and this morning she exercised her right to remove you from the account. But I have been paying the bill," Patricia argued, though even as she said it, she wasn't sure. "Luther handled the bills. Or so she thought. Actually, the payments have been coming from a private trust in Ms. Sterling's name for the last 60 months, David said. "You have zero liability, which is good news for you, but it also means you have zero access. The account is closed to you. Is there anything else I can help you with?" Patricia dropped the phone. It fell into the gap between the seat and the center console. She stared out the windshield. For 5 years, she thought she was living on Luther's pension and Hunter's investments. She thought she was the queen of the castle. But the truth was, she had been living on an allowance provided by the daughter she despised. She looked at the plastic card in her hand, the platinum card she used to define her worth. It was just a piece of useless plastic. Amara hadn't just cut off the money, she had cut off the oxygen. Patricia put her head on the steering wheel and let out a scream of pure, terrified rage. But inside the soundproof luxury car, no one could hear her. And even if they could, nobody cared. Her credit was no good here anymore. The guest house that I had been evicted from 48 hours ago had been transformed. My modest furniture was gone, replaced by sleek black gaming desks and 4 oversized monitors. Hunter sat in the center of this command station, the blue light of the screens reflecting off his sweaty face. He had not showered in 2 days. He was fueled by energy drinks and the manic delusion that he was about to become the next Warren Buffett of the crypto world. He had dumped the entire remaining $300,000 of the Ghost Ventures loan into a new, obscure coin called Apex Nova. He had found it on a Discord server. An anonymous tipster had promised him it was going to the moon. Hunter believed him because Hunter was greedy, and greed is a blinder that blocks out all logic. For the first hour, the line on the chart had gone up. Hunter had screamed in victory, texting Chanel that they were going to buy a yacht. He was up $50,000, then $100,000. He felt like a god. He was already planning his resignation speech to the world. But at 2:14 in the afternoon, the green candle on the screen stopped moving. It hovered for a second like a roller coaster pausing at the peak of a drop. "Come on," Hunter whispered, tapping the screen with a shaking finger. "Push through. Break the resistance." Then the red candle appeared. It was not a small dip. It was a vertical line straight down. In the span of 10 seconds, the price of Apex Nova went from $4 to 3 cents. Hunter blinked. He rubbed his eyes. He assumed it was a glitch in the software. He hit refresh. The page reloaded. Price 0.001. Total portfolio value $342. No, Hunter croaked. His voice was barely a whisper. No, no, no. He started clicking frantically. He tried to sell. The sell button was grayed out. A message popped up on the screen. Liquidity pool empty. Trading suspended. It was a rug pull. The anonymous developers had drained all the real money out of the system and disappeared into the digital ether, taking the Sterling family's future with them. Hunter stared at the number. $300,000. Evaporated. Gone. In less time than it took to sneeze. He stood up. His legs felt like jelly. A sound started low in his throat, a guttural growl that rose into a scream of pure primal agony. He grabbed the keyboard and smashed it against the desk. Keys flew into the air like plastic shrapnel. He punched the main monitor. The screen cracked, a spider web of dead pixels blooming across the glass. He swept the expensive microphone and the webcam onto the floor. He destroyed the room. He kicked the walls. He threw the chair through the window. He was tearing apart the physical world because his digital world had just been annihilated. He collapsed onto the floor, surrounded by broken glass and plastic. He pulled at his hair, rocking back and forth. "What did I do?" he sobbed. "Oh God, what did I do?" His phone, lying on the floor next to a piece of the broken keyboard, chimed. It was the specific, terrifying chime of a priority email. Hunter crawled toward it. His hand was bleeding from punching the screen, smearing red blood on the cracked phone glass. He saw the sender. Ghost Ventures legal team. He did not want to open it. He knew what it said. But he had to look. Subject notice of default and acceleration. Mr. Sterling, our automated risk management systems have detected a catastrophic loss of capital in your trading account. As per the real-time monitoring clause of your loan agreement, this constitutes a material adverse change. Furthermore, you have failed to provide proof of assets for the Porsche and Hermes purchases requested yesterday. You are hereby in default. Pursuant to the deed of trust signed by Luther and Patricia Sterling, Ghost Ventures is exercising its right to immediate foreclosure on the collateral property located at 440 Ocean Boulevard, Destin, Florida. We have filed the lien with the Okaloosa County Clerk. You have 24 hours to vacate any personal belongings from the Florida property before the locks are changed. Regards, the Ghost. Hunter threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and shattered. They knew. They knew everything. How did they know the coin crashed the second it happened? Paranoia seized him. This was not bad luck. This was a setup. Someone had fed him that tip on the Discord server. Someone had told him to buy Apex Nova, Amara. The name flashed in his mind like a neon sign. Amara was the ghost. Amara was the one who destroyed his life. She had humiliated him at the party. She had cut off the credit cards. And now she had tricked him into gambling away his parents' house. A dark, dangerous resolve settled over him. He was done being the victim. He was done being laughed at. He stood up and walked out of the guest house, ignoring the rain that had started to fall again. He walked into the main house. It was quiet. Patricia was in her room, probably crying over her declined credit cards. Chanel was likely hiding from social media. Hunter went into Luther's study. He opened the heavy oak cabinet where Luther kept his hunting rifles and his personal protection. He punched in the code to the small biometric safe. Luther had used his birthday as the code. Pathetic. The safe beeped open. Inside lay a black 9mm handgun. Cold, heavy, real. Hunter picked it up. He checked the magazine. It was full. He tucked the gun into the waistband of his pants. He grabbed the keys to the Porsche 911, the car he couldn't afford, the car that was about to be repossessed. "I am going to finish this," he whispered to the empty room. He drove to the city like a madman. The Porsche's engine screamed as he wove through traffic on I-85. He didn't care about speed cameras. He didn't care about safety. He was a man with nothing left to lose. He pulled up to the curb of the Millennium Tower, the ultra-luxury high-rise where Amara lived. He left the car running in the loading zone. He marched toward the glass revolving doors, his hand hovering near his waist. He expected a doorman. He expected a receptionist. What he got was a wall of muscle. Two men in tactical black suits stepped out of the lobby before Hunter could even touch the door handle. They were not normal security guards. They looked like ex-military. They wore earpieces and carried themselves with lethal calmness. "Can I help you, sir?" the taller one asked. He didn't smile. He stepped directly into Hunter's path. "Move!" Hunter snarled. "I am here to see Amara Sterling. I am family." "Ms. Sterling is not accepting visitors," the guard said. His eyes dropped to Hunter's waist, noticing the bulge of the gun beneath his t-shirt. "And certainly not visitors who are armed." Hunter froze. He hadn't even drawn the weapon, but these men had already clocked it. "She stole my money!" Hunter yelled, trying to draw attention from the people walking by. "She is a thief. Tell her to come down here. Tell her Hunter is here and I want my money back." "Sir, place your hands on your head," the guard said, his voice dropping an octave. "Do it now! Make me!" Hunter screamed. He reached for his waistband. It was a mistake. Before his hand could even grip the handle of the gun, the second guard moved. It was a blur of motion. Hunter felt his arm being twisted behind his back with agonizing force. His face was slammed into the cold glass of the building's exterior. The gun was ripped from his pants before he could even blink. "Let me go!" Hunter shrieked, struggling against the iron grip. "Amara, come out here, you coward!" Inside the lobby, through the glass, he saw movement. The elevator doors opened. Hunter stopped struggling. He pressed his face against the glass. Amara walked out. She was wearing a white silk suit, looking pristine and untouchable. She was holding a coffee cup. She walked slowly toward the glass. She stopped 3 feet away, looking at him like he was a bug on her windshield. She didn't look scared. She looked bored. She pulled out her phone and held it up to the glass. On the screen was a live video feed of the Florida house. A locksmith was already there drilling out the deadbolt. She pointed to the phone, then pointed to Hunter and mouthed 2 words. "Game over." Then she turned around and walked back to the elevator, not looking back once. Hunter slid down the glass wall, sobbing as the sirens of the Atlanta Police Department grew louder in the distance. The guards held him down face in the concrete, while the Porsche he had stolen the money to buy sat idling at the curb, running out of gas. The digital clock on my penthouse wall flickered to 6 o'clock in the morning. At that exact moment, 20 miles away in the affluent suburb of Buckhead, the heavy iron gates of the Sterling estate were being forced open. I sat with a cup of steaming tea, watching the live feed from the security cameras I had never deactivated. This was the moment I had been waiting for since I was 12 years old. This was not just a wake-up call, it was a reckoning. The convoy was impressive. 4 black SUVs, with government plates and 2 local police cruisers, tore up the driveway, scattering the gravel. They did not park politely. They swerved onto the manicured lawn that Patricia spent thousands of dollars maintaining every month. Tires tore up the pristine zoysia grass, leaving deep, muddy scars across the yard. Agents in windbreakers with the bright yellow letters IRSCID emblazoned on the back jumped out before the vehicles even came to a complete stop. They moved with the terrifying efficiency of a swarm of wasps. Criminal Investigation Division. These were not the auditors who sat at desks and asked for receipts. These were the agents who carried guns and kicked down doors. I turned up the volume on my speakers. Federal agents opened the door. The pounding on the heavy oak door echoed through my living room. It sounded like thunder. Inside the house, the scene was chaotic. I switched to the interior camera feed. Luther came stumbling out of the master bedroom, trying to tie the belt of his silk robe. He looked confused, disoriented, a man pulled from a dream of wealth into a nightmare of consequences. Patricia was right behind him, wearing her sleeping mask pushed up on her forehead, her hair a bird's nest of panic. "What is that noise?" Patricia shrieked. "Luther, Go see who it is. It is probably that ungrateful girl trying to scare us again. Luther reached the bottom of the grand staircase just as the front door was breached. They didn't wait for him to unlock it. A battering ram hit the lock mechanism, and the door swung open with a sickening crack of splintering wood. 10 agents flooded the foyer. Guns were drawn, pointed at the floor, but ready. "Federal search warrant," the lead agent shouted. He was a tall man with a face like granite. "Luther Sterling and Patricia Sterling, remain where you are. Keep your hands visible." Luther froze. He raised his hands, his silk sleeves slipping down his pale arms. "There must be a mistake," Luther stammered, his voice trembling. "I am a banker. I am a pillar of this community. You cannot just burst in here like this." The lead agent stepped forward and shoved a piece of paper into Luther's chest. "We have a warrant signed by a federal judge, Mr. Sterling. We are seizing all electronic devices, financial records, and assets related to the Sterling Family Trust, and the unauthorized appropriation of federal adoption stipends from 1998 to present day." Patricia let out a gasp that sounded like a balloon deflating. She grabbed the banister to hold herself up. "Adoption stipends," she whispered. But that was years ago. Nobody checks that. We check everything when we receive a tip with over 5,000 pages of documented evidence," the agent said coldly. "Secure the premises. I want every laptop, every phone, and every hard drive. Check the wall safes." The house was suddenly filled with noise. Agents ran up the stairs. I watched on the feed as they kicked open the door to Chanel's room. My sister screamed, "Get out! Get out of my room!" I watched Chanel try to grab her phone from the nightstand, likely to call a lawyer or delete her social media, but an agent snatched it from her hand and dropped it into an evidence bag. "Hey, that is mine," Chanel yelled, trying to slap the agent. "Ma'am, sit down, or you will be restrained," the agent barked. Downstairs, the humiliation was just beginning. The lead agent grabbed Luther's wrist. He spun him around. The sound of metal clicking against metal was crisp and final. "Handcuffs. You are under arrest for tax evasion, wire fraud, and identity theft," the agent recited. "Not Luther!" Patricia screamed, rushing down the remaining stairs. "He has a heart condition. You can't take him. He is innocent. It was a mistake. Our accountant made a mistake." The agent blocked her path. "We have the accountant in custody too, Mrs. Sterling. He is talking. He told us everything about the offshore accounts and the fake charity deductions." "We are going to walk you out now," the agent said to Luther. They began to march my father toward the ruined front door. I switched the camera view to the exterior security feed. The sun had fully risen now, casting a harsh morning light on the tragedy unfolding. And the audience had arrived. The neighbors. The people Patricia had spent decades trying to impress. The people she sneered at for having smaller lawns or older cars. They were all there. Mrs. Higgins from across the street was standing in her driveway, in her bathrobe, holding her phone up, recording video. The doctor from next door was watching from his balcony with his coffee. As the agents led Luther out, head bowed, wearing pajamas and handcuffs, the shutter sounds of phone cameras clicked like crickets. Patricia ran out onto the porch behind them. She saw the agents shoving her husband into the back of a government vehicle. Then she saw the neighbors. She saw Mrs. Higgins zooming in. She saw the flashing lights of the police cars reflecting off the windows of the other mansions. She realized that her social standing was dead. The curtain had fallen and everyone could see the rot backstage. Patricia did the only thing she knew how to do when reality became too unbearable. She decided to perform. "Oh, my heart!" Patricia cried out. She threw her hand to her forehead in a gesture straight out of a bad soap opera. She wobbled dramatically for a second, making sure everyone was watching, and then collapsed onto the porch. It was a fake faint. I had seen her do it a dozen times to get out of parking tickets or awkward conversations. She made sure to land gracefully on her hip so she wouldn't bruise. "Help my mother!" Chanel screamed from the doorway, playing her supporting role perfectly. "She is dying." "You are killing her." The lead agent didn't even blink. He looked down at Patricia, who was lying on the welcome mat with her eyes squeezed shut. her breathing perfectly even. He signaled to a female agent standing nearby. "Check her pulse," he said, sounding bored. "If she is faking, add obstruction of justice to her file." Patricia's eyes snapped open instantly. She scrambled to a sitting position, fixing her robe. "I am fine," she snapped. I I just felt dizzy." "Get up," Mrs. Sterling, the agent said. "We are not done. We need to clear the master bedroom safe." Patricia went pale. "No," she whispered. "Not the safe. That is personal. That is my jewelry." "Everything purchased with illicit funds is subject to seizure," the agent said. He signaled to two officers who were carrying out a large velvet-lined box. It was a massive jewelry chest. I knew that box well. It contained the diamond tennis bracelet she bought the year I didn't get braces. It contained the sapphire necklace she bought the year she told me there was no money for my college tuition. It contained 30 years of my stolen potential crystallized into carbon and gold. "My diamonds!" Patricia shrieked, scrambling to her feet and lunging at the officer holding the box. "You can't take those!" "Those are heirlooms, officer. Secure her," the lead agent shouted. The officer sidestepped her, and Patricia stumbled, catching herself on the doorframe. She watched with wide, horrified eyes as the officer carried the heavy box toward the evidence van. "That is mine," she wailed, tears finally streaming down her face. Not fake tears this time, real agony-filled tears of greed. "That is everything I have." I sat in my penthouse watching the pixelated image of my mother crying over cold stones while her husband sat in a cage. She didn't cry for Luther. She didn't cry for the shame. She cried for the shiny things. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the lead agent, which I had on speed dial. "Agent Miller," I said when he picked up. "Ms. Sterling," Miller said. "We have secured the premises." "Did you find the safe behind the painting in the library?" I asked, taking a sip of tea. "We just located it," Miller said. "Good," I said. "That is where she keeps the cash, the skimming money from the church fund. You might want to count it carefully." I hung up. On the screen I saw Patricia watching the jewelry van drive away. She looked small. She looked old. And for the first time in her life she looked broke. But I wasn't done. The jewelry was just the appetizer. I wanted the main course. I wanted the house. The interrogation room at the Federal Building was designed to break people. It was a windowless box painted in a color that could only be described as despair gray. The air conditioning was cranked down to a shivering temperature, and the fluorescent light overhead buzzed with a low, maddening hum. Luther Sterling sat on one side of the metal table. His expensive silk pajamas had been replaced by a bright orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. He was not wearing his glasses. Without them, and without the armor of his bespoke suits, he looked small. He looked frail. He looked like exactly what he was, a man whose entire identity had been constructed on a foundation of lies. The heavy steel door buzzed and swung open. Luther looked up, hope flickering in his watery eyes. He expected a lawyer. He expected his high-priced fixers to come walking in with a briefcase full of loopholes to make this nightmare go away. Instead, he saw me. I walked into the room, my heels clicking sharply against the linoleum floor. I was still wearing the emerald gown from the gala, though I had thrown a white trench coat over it. I looked like I was coming from a premiere. He looked like he was going to a funeral. Behind me walked Mr. Sterling's worst nightmare. Not a federal agent, but my personal attorney, Julian Vance. Julian was known in the city as the shark in a silk tie. He carried a thick accordion folder. Amara, Luther whispered. His voice was cracked and dry. "Thank God. You came. You have to tell them, Amara. Tell them this is a misunderstanding. Tell them we are family." I didn't answer. I pulled out the metal chair opposite him and sat down. I didn't lean forward. I didn't reach for his hand. I simply placed my hands on the table, folding them calmly. Julian placed the folder on the table between us. He opened it with surgical precision. "Mr. Sterling," Julian began, his voice smooth and devoid of empathy. "We are not here to discuss family. We are here to discuss the contents of the biological parents' estate of Amara Sterling, deceased 1998. Luther flinched. The color drained from his face, leaving him a sickly shade of gray. I don't know what you are talking about, Luther stammered. Your parents died penniless, Amara. It was a tragedy. A car accident. We took you in out of charity. Stop, I said. The single word cut through the air like a blade. Luther's mouth snapped shut. I reached into the folder and pulled out a document. It was a copy of a bank transfer dated 22 years ago. Charity, I asked, sliding the paper toward him. Is that what you call it? Because according to this wire transfer from the Zurich Insurance Group, my biological parents had a life insurance policy. A policy worth $2.4 million. Luther stared at the paper. His hands started to shake uncontrollably. I watched him. I watched the man I had called Dad for 30 years. I remembered him teaching me to ride a bike. I remembered him sitting at the dinner table nodding while Patricia insulted me. I remembered him signing the mortgage papers yesterday to save his reputation. You knew, I said softly. You knew about the money the day you signed the adoption papers. Luther looked down at his cuffed hands. It was complicated, Amara. We were struggling. The market had crashed. We were going to lose the house. So you stole it, I said. We invested it, Luther cried, looking up with desperate eyes. We invested it in the family. In your future, we used it to maintain the lifestyle you enjoyed, the private schools, the vacations I wasn't allowed to go on, I asked. The schools where I was forced to wear hand-me-down uniforms while Chanel got new ones every semester. I pulled out another document. This one was a forgery analysis. This is a withdrawal slip from the trust account, I said, pointing to the signature line. Dated 3 months after my 18th birthday. It empties the remaining balance of $1.8 million. The signature says, Amara Sterling. I leaned forward. I was in the hospital getting my appendix removed on that day, Luther. I couldn't have signed this. You forged my signature. You and Patricia. You stole my inheritance, bought the mansion in Buckhead, and renovated the kitchen for Chanel. Luther began to weep. It was a pathetic wheezing sound. We meant to pay it back, he sobbed. We always meant to pay it back. But then the expenses kept piling up. Chanel needed the car. Patricia needed the club memberships. We couldn't stop. I sat back feeling a cold numbness in my chest. I had suspected it. I had seen the trails in the data. But hearing him admit that my entire childhood of poverty and servitude was funded by my own stolen fortune, it hardened the last piece of my heart. You didn't adopt a daughter, I said. You acquired an asset. You looked at a grieving 5-year-old girl and you didn't see a child. You saw a piggy bank. Amara, please, Luther begged, reaching out with his cuffed hands. I am your father. I love you. Doesn't that mean anything? I looked at his hands, the hands that had signed away my future. It means nothing, I said. Because you don't love me, Luther. You love the money, and now the money is gone. Julian stepped forward. Mr. Sterling, the federal prosecutor, is preparing to charge you with Class A felony embezzlement, wire fraud, and aggravated identity theft. Given the amount stolen and the duration of the crime, you are looking at a minimum mandatory sentence of 20 years in federal prison. Luther let out a wail. 20 years, I will die in there. I am 60 years old. However, Julian continued, ignoring the outburst, my client is willing to offer a civil compromise, a deal that she will present to the district attorney to recommend leniency. Luther looked up, sniffing. A deal, anything. I will do anything. I pulled the final document from the folder. It was a thick legal agreement. This is a transfer of assets, I said. It signs over everything, Luther. And I mean everything. The deed to the Buckhead mansion, the remaining equity in the Florida house, your stock portfolio, your 401k, Patricia's jewelry collection, the cars, the art. Luther's eyes widened. You want to leave us with nothing. I want my $2.4 million back plus interest, I said coldly. And since you spent it all on maintaining a fake image, I am taking the image. I slid a pen across the table. Sign the papers, Luther. Sign over every single thing you own to me. If you do, I will tell the prosecutor that I consider restitution made. You will likely get probation and a heavy fine. You will avoid prison. And if I don't, Luther whispered. Then I walk out of this room, I said. I give the original copies of these forgeries to the FBI. And I will make sure they put you in a cell with a roommate who doesn't care about your country club membership. Luther looked at the pen. He looked at the document. He looked at the years of his life dissolving into ink on a page. What about Patricia? He asked weakly. What about Chanel? Where will we live? That is not my problem, I said. Maybe you can stay in the guest shed. Oh wait, I forgot. You kicked me out of there. Luther picked up the pen. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He looked at me one last time, searching for a trace of the little girl who used to make him Father's Day cards. He didn't find her. She was gone. He pressed the pen to the paper. I watched as he signed his name. One signature to steal my life. One signature to give it back. When he finished, he dropped the pen and put his head in his hands. Get out, he whispered. Just get out. I stood up. Julian collected the papers and placed them back in the folder. I walked to the door. I paused with my hand on the handle. By the way, Luther, I said. He didn't look up. I am not going to ask for leniency for Patricia. She was the mastermind. You were just the wallet. She is going to prison. And you are going to have to visit her and explain why you are living in a one-bedroom apartment while your daughter lives in your mansion. I opened the door and walked out into the hallway. The air was fresher out here. I took a deep breath. I had the house. I had the money. I had the justice. But the war wasn't over. There was one person left. Chanel. And I had a very special plan for my dear sister. I turned to Julian. Execute the eviction notice, I said, and call the locksmith. I want to move into my new house by dinner. The taxi ride back from the federal detention center was silent. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that smelled of stale sweat, industrial soap, and fear. Luther, Patricia Hunter, and Chanel sat crammed into the back of the large van they had to hire because their own cars had been impounded. Nobody spoke. Nobody looked at each other. They were a family of ghosts, haunting the ruins of their own lives. They had spent 12 hours in holding cells. Patricia's hair was matted against her skull. Her makeup was smeared in dark streaks down her cheeks. Luther looked 10 years older, his hands trembling in his lap. Chanel was curled in a ball, staring out the window, her thumbs twitching, as if she were trying to text on a phone she no longer had. Hunter stared at the floor, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping in his cheek. The van pulled up to the iron gates of the Sterling estate. The gates were open. That was the first sign that something was wrong. Patricia usually insisted they be kept closed at all times to keep the commoners out. The driver idled at the front steps. That will be $80, he said. Luther patted his pockets automatically, then froze. He had no wallet. It was in an evidence bag downtown. I don't have cash, Luther whispered. Patricia let out a sob. She dug into her purse, which the agents had returned to her, but it was empty of credit cards. She found a crumpled $100 bill tucked into a side pocket, emergency money she had hidden years ago. She threw it at the driver. Keep the change, she snapped, trying to summon a shred of her old arrogance. Just get us out of here. They stumbled out of the van and up the front steps. The house was dark. The windows stared back at them like hollow eyes. I just want a hot shower, Chanel whined, shivering in the evening air. And I want to order sushi. I am starving. We have to figure out a plan, Hunter muttered, unlocking the front door. We have to call a fixer. We can spin this. We can say it was a misunderstanding. They pushed the heavy doors open and walked into the foyer. Immediately they stopped. The house was not dark. A warm golden glow was spilling from the dining room, and there was a smell. It wasn't the smell of old dust or cleaning products. It was the rich, savory scent of rosemary, garlic, and seared beef. It smelled like a five-star restaurant. "Who is here?" Patricia whispered, grabbing Luther's arm. "Did you leave the stove on?" I... I don't think so," Luther stammered. They walked slowly toward the dining room, drawn by the light and the smell. Their footsteps echoed on the marble floor. When they reached the archway, they froze. The dining room table was set, not for a party, not for a family. It was set for one. At the head of the table, in the high-backed chair that had belonged to Luther for 30 years, sat a woman. It was me. I was wearing a silk robe that shimmered like liquid silver. My hair was loose, cascading over my shoulders. In front of me sat a plate with a perfect bone and ribeye steak, a side of truffle mashed potatoes and glazed asparagus. A glass of the 1992 Cabernet sat near my hand. I sliced a piece of the steak. The knife slid through the meat like butter. I brought the fork to my mouth, chewed slowly, and swallowed. I took a sip of wine. Then I looked up. "Welcome home," I said. My voice was calm, conversational. "You look terrible." Patricia let out a screech. "Amara, what are you doing here? How did you get in?" "I have a key, Mother," I said, cutting another piece of steak. "Or did you forget I grew up here?" "Get out of my chair," Luther said weakly. He didn't have the energy to shout, but the sight of me in his seat clearly disturbed him. I didn't move. I pointed the steak knife at the empty chairs. "Sit down," I said. "You must be hungry. Jail food is notoriously heavy on carbohydrates and low on protein." Hunter stepped forward. His eyes were wild. He looked like a cornered animal. "You think this is funny?" Hunter spat. "You think this is a game? You ruined us. You called the IRS. You called the SEC. You set me up." I took another bite of potato. "I didn't set you up, Hunter. I just turned on the lights. You were the one doing the dirty dancing in the dark." Chanel rushed toward the table, her hands balled into fists. "Get out! Get out of our house! We are going to call the police." "Go ahead," I said, gesturing to the landline on the sideboard. "Oh wait, I canceled the phone service this morning, and I assume they took your cell phones. That is unfortunate." Patricia marched up to the table. She slammed her hand down next to my plate, rattling the silverware. "I have had enough of this. You ungrateful, spiteful little witch. I am going to drag you out of here by your hair if I have to." She reached for me. Before her fingers could touch my robe, a shadow detached itself from the corner of the room. Marcus, my head of security, stepped into the light. He was 6 feet 4 inches of pure muscle, dressed in a black suit that strained against his shoulders. He didn't say a word. He just cleared his throat. A low, rumbling sound that vibrated in the floorboards. Patricia jumped back, clutching her chest. "Who is that?" "That is Marcus," I said. "He doesn't like it when people touch me." Hunter looked at Marcus. He sized him up. Hunter was desperate. He was humiliated, and he was stupid. He saw one man standing between him and the woman he blamed for everything. "I don't care who he is," Hunter yelled. Hunter lunged. He didn't go for Marcus. He went for me. He grabbed a heavy crystal vase from the sideboard and raised it over his head, screaming in a blind rage. "I will kill you." I didn't flinch. I didn't even put down my fork. Marcus moved with a speed that defied his size. He didn't tackle Hunter. He didn't punch him. He simply stepped forward, grabbed Hunter's wrist in midair, and twisted. There was a sickening pop. Hunter screamed and dropped the vase. It shattered on the floor, sending crystal shards everywhere. In one fluid motion, Marcus swept Hunter's legs out from under him. Hunter hit the floor hard. The breath left his lungs in a whoosh. Before he could scramble away, Marcus placed one heavy polished shoe on the center of Hunter's chest, pinning him to the Persian rug like a bug. Hunter gasped, clawing at the shoe, but he couldn't move. Chanel screamed, dropping to her knees beside him. "Get off him! You are hurting him!" Marcus looked at me, waiting for orders. "Let him up, Marcus," I said. "I don't want him bleeding on my rug. It is an antique." Marcus stepped back. Hunter rolled over, coughing, clutching his wrist. He looked up at me with pure hatred, but also pure fear. I took a napkin and dabbed the corner of my mouth. I looked at Luther. He was standing by the door, pale and shaking. He knew. He remembered the papers he had signed in the interrogation room. "Tell them, Luther," I said. Patricia looked at her husband. "Tell us what, Luther? Why aren't you doing anything? Throw her out." Luther walked slowly to the table. He pulled out a chair, but he didn't sit. He gripped the back of it for support. "We can't," Patricia Luther whispered. "What do you mean we can't?" Patricia shrieked. "It is our house." "No," Luther said. A tear rolled down his cheek. "It isn't. Not anymore." The room went deadly silent. Even Hunter stopped groaning. "I signed it over," Luther said, his voice breaking. "In the interrogation room, to avoid prison. I signed a restitution agreement. I gave her everything. The house, the accounts, the cars, everything." Patricia stared at him. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at the walls. She looked at the chandelier. She looked at the life she had built on lies crumbling into dust. You gave her my house," Patricia whispered. "It was never your house, Mother," I corrected her. "It was bought with my money. Luther just returned it to its rightful owner." I stood up. I picked up the bottle of wine and poured the remaining liquid into my glass. I walked over to the head of the table. I looked down at them. My family, my tormentors, my victims. "There are some sandwiches in the kitchen," I said. "Bologna and cheese. I suggest you eat them." I took a sip of wine and smiled. "Eat fast," I said, "because this is the last meal you will ever eat in my house. My movers are coming at 8 a.m. tomorrow. I want you, your clothes, and your bad energy out of here by 7. I turned and walked toward the door, Marcus falling into step behind me. "Oh, and Hunter!" I called back over my shoulder. He looked up from the floor, nursing his wrist. I checked the market. Apex Nova just hit 0. Looks like you really are broke. I walked out of the dining room, leaving them in the ruins of their former glory, with nothing but the smell of my steak and the taste of their own failure. Hunter sat on the Persian rug, clutching his wrist where Marcus had twisted it. He looked up at me with a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. The name Ghost Ventures was echoing in his mind, bouncing around the empty cavern of his skull. I could see the gears turning. He was trying to connect the dots, but his arrogance had blinded him for so long that he could not see the picture even when it was painted in front of him. "You," Hunter whispered. His voice was a dry rasp. "You know about Ghost Ventures. How do you know about them?" "They are a Swiss firm. They are private equity." I let out a soft laugh. It was a dark, rich sound that filled the silent dining room. I put down my wine glass and stood up. I walked slowly around the table, my silk robe trailing behind me like a royal train. I stopped right in front of him. "Hunter," I said, looking down at him, "do you really think a legitimate Swiss equity firm would loan $500,000 to a man with a credit score of 500 and no business plan? Do you really think a sophisticated algorithm approved your loan in 10 minutes? I leaned down, my face inches from his. "There is no algorithm, Hunter. There is no board of directors in Zurich. There is just me, sitting in my penthouse, eating popcorn, and watching you sign your life away on an iPad." Hunter scrambled back, pushing himself across the floor with his good hand. "No, that is impossible. You are a secretary. You don't have that kind of capital." I straightened up. "I am the managing partner of Sterling Holdings, the parent company of Ghost Ventures. And yes, Hunter, I approved the loan. I watched you buy the Porsche. I watched you buy that fake bag. And I watched you gamble the rest away on a crypto coin that I shorted 2 days ago." Hunter's face went white. You shorted it." I smiled. "I made $300,000 on your loss, Hunter. Essentially, you paid me to bankrupt you. It was the easiest money I have ever made." Chanel let out a wail from the corner of the room. She was shaking her head back and forth, pulling at her hair extensions. "This is a nightmare," she sobbed. "Wake up, Chanel! Wake up!" It is not a nightmare, sister, I said, turning to her. It is a foreclosure. And speaking of which, I walked over to the sideboard where my purse was sitting. I pulled out a set of keys. They were not the keys to the house. They were the keys to a Porsche 911 GT3. The police impounded your car when you were arrested at my building, Hunter. But since I am the lien holder on the vehicle and you defaulted on the loan, they released it to me. It is parked in the garage right now, next to my G-Wagon. Chanel's eyes widened. She crawled across the floor toward me. She didn't look like the golden child anymore. She looked like a beggar. Her mascara was running, her designer dress was wrinkled from the jail cell, and her dignity was gone. Amara, please, she begged, reaching for the hem of my robe. You can't take the car. It is the only thing we have left. The house is gone. The money is gone. Please let us keep the car. We can sell it. We can use the money to start over. Please, we are sisters. I looked down at her. I remembered the day she laughed when I fell off my bike and broke my arm. I remembered the day she told her friends I was the maid's daughter. I remembered her live streaming my eviction 3 days ago. Sisters, I repeated. That is a funny word. Was I your sister when you threw my clothes in the mud? Was I your sister when you made me sit at the children's table until I was 25? I am sorry, Chanel cried, gripping my ankle. I am so sorry. I will do anything. Just give me the keys. Please, Amara. I don't know how to take the bus. I looked at the keys in my hand. Then I looked at the corner of the room where the pile of their belongings had been dumped by the police. Sitting on top of the pile was the fake black Hermes bag, the one that had started the humiliation at the gala. I walked over to the pile. Chanel followed me on her knees, sobbing. I picked up the bag. It felt cheap and plastic in my hands. You want a handout? I asked. Yes, yes, please. Chanel wept. I dropped the car keys into my pocket. I can't give you the car, Chanel. I am going to sell it to recover my losses. But I will give you this. I dropped the fake Hermes bag onto the floor in front of her. Then, with a casual flick of my foot, I kicked it toward her. It slid across the polished wood and hit her knee. Take it, I said coldly. It is big enough to hold your clothes, and it suits you perfectly. Chanel stared at the bag, the symbol of her fraud, the reason she was a laughingstock. She let out a scream of frustration and threw herself onto the bag, weeping uncontrollably. Patricia stood by the wall, silent. She was not begging. She was staring at me with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. She knew there was no point in pleading. She knew me better than they did. She knew that once I made a decision, it was final. You are evil, Patricia whispered. You are a demon. I turned to her. No, Mother. I am just a tax write-off. Remember? Suddenly, a loud, authoritative pounding echoed from the front door. Boom, boom, boom. The sound vibrated through the house, shaking the crystals in the chandelier. It was not a polite knock. It was the knock of the law. Luther jumped. Hunter flinched. Chanel stopped crying and looked at the door with terror. Who is that? Luther whispered. I checked my watch. It was exactly 8 o'clock in the evening. That would be Sheriff Johnson, I said, checking my nails. I told him I expected some resistance with the eviction process. He is here to escort you off the premises. The pounding came again. Sheriff's Department, open up. We have a court order. I walked to the double doors of the dining room. I placed my hand on the handle. I looked back at them one last time. 4 broken people in a room that smelled of the success they would never taste again. Goodbye, family, I said. I opened the doors and walked into the foyer to let the sheriff in. Behind me, the sound of their weeping was the only music I needed. The final act was over. The curtain had fallen, and I was the only one left standing on the stage. The front door of the Sterling estate did not open. It was breached. Sheriff Johnson did not have the patience for negotiation, and the court order in his hand gave him the authority to use necessary force. 2 uniformed deputies pushed past the heavy oak doors, their boots squeaking on the marble foyer, where my family stood like statues in a museum of failure. This is a private residence, Patricia shrieked, clutching her chest. "You have no right to barge in here like common criminals." Sheriff Johnson stepped into the light of the chandelier. He was a large man with a face that had seen every excuse in the book. He looked at Patricia, then at the writ of possession in his hand. "Ma'am, this is no longer a private residence for you. This is a foreclosure eviction. You have 10 minutes to vacate the premises before you are removed for trespassing." 10 minutes, Chanel gasped. She looked at the mountain of Louis Vuitton luggage she had tried to pack. "But I haven't finished packing my shoes. I have over 200 pairs." "You can collect your personal property from the curb," the sheriff said flatly. He signaled to the team of movers waiting behind him. These were not white-glove movers. These were court-appointed eviction crews. They were paid by the hour, and they did not care about the thread count of the linens or the provenance of the antiques. "Start clearing the rooms," the sheriff ordered. "Everything goes to the street." No, Hunter yelled, trying to block the staircase. "You are not touching my stuff." A deputy placed a hand on his taser. "Sir, step aside or you will be detained for obstruction." Again. Hunter flinched. The memory of the federal holding cell was still fresh. He stepped aside, defeated. And then the chaos began. It was a symphony of destruction. The movers marched through the house like ants. They grabbed armfuls of Patricia's designer coats. They grabbed Chanel's limited edition sneakers. They grabbed Luther's golf clubs. And they marched them out the front door. I stood in the dining room watching through the French doors. I held my wine glass, the liquid dark and still. It was starting to rain outside, a heavy torrential downpour that pounded against the glass. It was the exact same weather as the night they had thrown me out. The universe was not just balancing the scales, it was slamming them down. I watched as the movers reached the curb. They did not stack the items neatly. They dumped them. A pile of Chanel's silk dresses landed in a puddle of oily water. Patricia's fur coats were tossed onto the wet grass, soaking up the mud like sponges. Luther's collection of vintage records was left exposed to the elements. My family ran out into the rain. They were screaming, running back and forth, trying to save their possessions. "My furs." Patricia wailed, trying to cover a mink coat with her body. "You are ruining them. These are worth thousands." Chanel was on her knees in the mud, frantically trying to put her shoes back into boxes that were disintegrating in the wetness. "Stop it! Stop throwing them!" Chanel screamed at a mover who had just dumped a drawer full of lingerie onto the sidewalk. The mover just shrugged and walked back to the truck. I walked to the front window. The glass was cool against my forehead. I watched the scene with a detachment that surprised even me. I felt no joy. I felt no pity. I just felt the cold, hard satisfaction of a mathematical equation finally being solved. Out on the lawn, the shock was wearing off and the blame was setting in. "This is your fault," Hunter screamed, shoving Patricia. He was soaked to the bone, his expensive shirt clinging to his chest. "You and your greed. If you hadn't stolen her money, none of this would have happened." "My greed," Patricia shrieked, pushing him back. "You are the one who gambled away the loan. You are the one who signed the house over. You stupid, arrogant little boy. You told us you were a genius." "I am a genius," Hunter yelled, his voice cracking. "I was trying to save this family. You are the one who treated her like a slave. If you had just been nice to her, she wouldn't have come after us." "Oh, stop it!" Chanel screamed, standing up. She was holding a soaking wet Hermes box, the fake one I had given her. "You are both losers. You ruined my life. How am I supposed to be an influencer now? I am homeless. Look at me." She threw the box at Hunter. It hit him in the chest. "Shut up," Chanel Hunter roared. "You and your fake bags. You are the reason we are broke. You spend money like water." They were circling each other in the rain, tearing each other apart. The neighbors had come out onto their porches again. The show was too good to miss. The wealthy Sterling family, the pillars of the community, fighting like rats in a sewer. Luther stood apart from them. He was standing by the mailbox, holding a framed picture of the family that a mover had dropped. The glass was cracked. Rainwater was seeping under the frame, distorting the smiling faces. He looked at the house. He looked at the warm glow of the windows. Then he looked at me. Our eyes locked through the rain and the glass. He raised a hand as if to wave or to beg. He looked old. He looked broken. He mouthed one word. Please. I didn't blink. I didn't move. I simply raised my wine glass in a silent toast. Goodbye, Luther. The sheriff walked up to them on the lawn. Folks, you need to move these items off the easement or the city will come and haul them to the dump. You can't block the sidewalk. Where are we supposed to go? Patricia sobbed, her mascara running down her face in black rivers. We have nowhere to go. That is a civil matter, ma'am, the sheriff said, turning his back on them. He walked up the steps to the front door where I was standing. He tapped on the glass. I opened the door. The air was cold and smelled of rain and ozone. The property is secured, Ms. Sterling, the sheriff said, tipping his hat. The writ has been executed. They are officially off the premises. Thank you, Sheriff, I said. I looked past him. Hunter was sitting on the curb, head in his hands. Patricia was trying to flag down a taxi that refused to stop. Chanel was dragging a wet suitcase down the street, one wheel broken and scraping loudly against the pavement. They looked like refugees from a life they never deserved. I stepped back inside. The foyer was quiet. The ghosts were gone. I turned to the man standing behind me. He was wearing a tool belt and holding a drill. Are you the locksmith? I asked. Yes, ma'am, he said. I looked at the heavy oak door. The lock that had kept me out. The lock that had kept me prisoner. Change it, I said. Standard deadbolt, he asked. I shook my head. No. I want the biometric system. Fingerprint and retinal scan. High security. I paused, looking at the empty driveway where the rain was washing away their tire tracks. And program it for one user only, I added softly. Me. I closed the door. The heavy thud shut out the sound of the rain, the sound of the fighting, and the sound of my past. I turned the deadbolt. Click. I was alone. I was safe. And for the first time in 30 years, I was home. The champagne in the first-class lounge at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport tasted different than the wine I had drunk in the dining room of the Sterling estate. That wine had tasted like vengeance. This champagne tasted like freedom. It was crisp cold and cost $300 a bottle. I sat in a leather armchair by the window watching the massive Boeing 747 being refueled on the tarmac. It was a machine built for distance just like me. It had been exactly 7 days since the eviction, 7 days since I changed the locks. In that short week, I had dismantled 30 years of history with the efficiency of a demolition crew. The house in Buckhead was sold. I didn't wait for the market to improve. I sold it to a cash buyer, a tech CEO from Silicon Valley who planned to gut the interior completely. He called the kitchen Patricia's pride and joy, dated and tacky. I signed the closing papers yesterday. The proceeds, along with the liquidation of the Florida beach house and the sale of the Porsche, had been deposited into my offshore trust. Every cent I had put into that family had been recovered with interest. I looked down at my phone. It was the last time I would ever look at this device. The screen was filled with notifications from blocked numbers. My service provider had filtered them into a spam folder, but I opened it one last time just to see the wreckage. There were 42 voicemails from a number listed as Motel 6, Atlanta North. That would be Patricia. I didn't listen to them, but the transcription feature gave me the gist. Amara, please pick up. Amara, we have no heat. Amara, your father is sick. Amara, you cannot do this to us. There were texts from an unknown number that I knew was Chanel. They were erratic, oscillating between begging and cursing. I hate you. Please send me $50 for food. You are going to hell. I am sorry, please answer. And there was nothing from Hunter. Not a single word. Because Hunter was currently in county lockup, unable to make bail on the charges of grand larceny and possession of a stolen firearm. I scrolled to the bottom of the list and hit select all. Then I hit delete. The screen cleared. No messages, no history. It was a digital tabula rasa. I looked up at the television screen mounted on the wall of the lounge. The local news was playing on mute, but the chyron at the bottom of the screen caught my eye. I reached for the remote and turned the volume up slightly. Breaking news in the Buckhead financial scandal, the anchorwoman said. Her face was grave. Federal prosecutors have formally indicted Luther Sterling, a former church treasurer and local banker, on 12 counts of wire fraud and embezzlement. The screen cut to footage filmed outside the courthouse. Luther was being led out of a police van. He looked unrecognizable. His hair, usually dyed a youthful black, was showing gray roots. He was hunched over, trying to hide his face from the cameras with his cuffed hands. Patricia was walking behind him, shielding her face with a newspaper, wearing a coat that looked like she had pulled it out of a dumpster. Authorities state that the Sterlings allegedly misappropriated over $2 million in funds intended for the care of their adopted daughter, as well as skimming donations from the Greater Atlanta Faith Foundation. The reporter continued. If convicted, Luther Sterling faces up to 20 years in federal prison. Patricia Sterling has also been charged as an accomplice. I watched my father stumble on the courthouse steps. I watched my mother shove a camera away, her face twisted in a snarl. They looked like strangers. A waiter approached my table. More champagne. Ms. Sterling. No, thank you, I said, setting the glass down. I have a flight to catch. I stood up and picked up my carry-on bag. It was the only luggage I was taking. I had donated all my old clothes to a shelter. The clothes I was wearing now, a cashmere travel set and Italian leather boots, were brand new. I was not taking a single thread of my old life across the ocean. I walked out of the lounge and toward Gate E14. The terminal was crowded with families going on vacation, businessmen yelling into phones, and couples holding hands. I walked through them like a ghost, untouched and unseen. I reached the gate just as the agent announced pre-boarding for first-class passengers. I handed her my boarding pass. She scanned it. Have a wonderful flight to Paris, Ms. Sterling, she said with a smile. Thank you, I said. I intend to. I walked down the jet bridge. The cool air of the tunnel hit my face. Halfway down, I stopped. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I popped the SIM card slot open. The tiny chip the size of a fingernail fell into my palm. This chip held the number that Patricia had used to scream at me, the number Hunter had used to send me threats, the number that had been my leash for 3 decades. There was a trash can next to the door of the plane. I held the chip over the bin. I didn't hesitate. I didn't say a prayer. I simply opened my fingers and let it fall. It landed among the discarded coffee cups and candy wrappers. Trash. Exactly where it belonged. I stepped onto the plane. The flight attendant greeted me by name and guided me to seat 1A. It was a private suite with a sliding door. I sat down and buckled my belt. I looked out the window. The Atlanta skyline was visible in the distance, a cluster of jagged teeth against the gray sky. Somewhere in that city, my family was sitting in a motel room or a jail cell, blaming me for their downfall. They would spend the rest of their lives telling people how I betrayed them. They would paint themselves as victims. Let them. The engines roared to life. The plane began to taxi. I felt the familiar pull of acceleration, the pressure pushing me back into the seat. We lifted off the ground, climbing higher and higher, punching through the layer of clouds, until the city below disappeared completely. I closed the window shade. Patricia had told the truth about one thing on my birthday. She said I was an investment. She said I was a financial calculation. She was right. But she forgot the most basic rule of economics. Compound interest works both ways. They invested cruelty, neglect, and theft into me for 30 years. They thought the debt would never come due. They thought I was a zero on their balance sheet. I leaned back and closed my eyes as the plane leveled off at 30,000 feet. They wanted a tax benefit. I gave them a tax audit. And the final penalty was everything they had. I smiled in the darkness of my suite. Transaction complete. This story is a brutal reminder that DNA does not equal family, and silence does not equal weakness. For years, Amara allowed herself to be defined by her family's narrative that she was a burden, when in reality, she was their lifeline. The most powerful lesson here is that you cannot buy love with loyalty, and you cannot save people who are committed to destroying you. True freedom begins the moment you stop waiting for an apology that will never come and start building the leverage to walk away. Your worth is not a tax write-off. It is a non-negotiable asset. If Amara's journey from the garden shed to the penthouse resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this story with someone who needs to know that it is never too late to cut toxic ties and reclaim their life. Have you ever had to be the villain in someone else's story just to save yourself? I want to hear your truth in the comments below. Remember, the best revenge isn't anger, it's success, silence, and a one-way ticket to your own happiness.